안녕하세요. 반갑습니다. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the session. We had a long day yesterday. I see more or less the same participants. Some of you were in another session where I moderated. Again, thank you for your participation. So this session is about global citizenship education for learning to live together. You may not know of this report of UNESCO, but in UNESCO, we think it's a kind of a landmark report called Delors report, which identified what we call 4 pillars of education and learning. That is learning to do, learning to be, learning to know, and learning to live together. As we all understand, 3 pillars of learning and education have been very much focused in many of our member states, including Korea. So if you look at the way students or learners are being tested, they test what people know, what people do, etc. If you look at national tests of all kinds, college entrance examination, it's basically about testing the cognitive dimension of learning. And also, if you look at international tests like PISA and TIMSS, these tests also address the issue of learning to know the other dimension of learning. But seldom we all understand the learning to live is very important, and yet in reality, this noble notion is not fully integrated in education learning system in many of our education system, including, again, Korea. So the issue before us is how we operationalize learning to live together with the noble notion of global citizenship education. With that, the aim of this session is for us to have better understanding of what global citizenship or learning to live together is all about. And then with that, how we are going to implement global citizen education. How is it going to be an important agenda at the global, regional, and national level? So the purpose, I would say, is twofold: for us to have a better understanding, first of all, and then secondly, where we stand in terms of GCE, global citizen education, as an education agenda, again, at the global, regional, and national level. So with that, we have 2 distinguished speakers and 2 renowned discussants. Before that, I would like to suggest that because we have 2 speakers, I'll give them each 20 minutes for their deliberation, and this will be followed by 2 discussants, 10 minutes each. With that, we may spend about an hour for our initial intervention. My role as a moderator would be to maximize interaction between you at the floor and the panelists and speakers here at the panel, so that we can learn more from the discussion. At the end of the day, by the time you leave the room, I hope that you will have a clear understanding of GC and also where we are going with this GC. With that, without further ado, let me introduce our distinguished speakers. Dr. Arief Rachman, to my left, he is Executive Chairman of Indonesian National Commission for UNESCO, but he would love to be introduced as a teacher or philosopher. He represents not only Indonesia, in a way, all our member states in Asia, Pacific, and beyond. So I'm very honored to have you, Pak Arief. And next to Pak Arief, Ms. Minjeong is head of what we call Global Education First Initiative team. So Ms. Kim, as you can see, is originally from Korea, but he represents the whole of UN and UNESCO for this meeting. I'm glad to have you, Ms. Kim. Next to him, Dr. Utak Chung, whom I'm sure many of you know already. Dr. Utak Chung is heading the director of APSEU, Asia Pacific Institute of Education for International Understanding. Very long name. In Korean, 아태평화이해교육원 as extension of UNESCO organization. And next to him, we have a distinguished scholar from Yonsei University, Professor Park Soonyong, who is the expert in this area. So these two gentlemen will share their thoughts after the speech. So with that, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Rachman. The floor is yours, 20 minutes. When time is already up, I will show this to you.
Yes.
Okay?
Thank you very much. I'd rather stand here because over there and then over here is difficult.
Should I stand here?
No, it's okay. It's okay. Seyo. It's an honor, actually, to speak on global citizenship. My teacher is Professor Kim Yong-jil. Would you please stand up, please? He is my teacher for this, yes. Give him a big applause. Yes, and also, of course, our next speaker, Minjeong Kim, Madam Minjeong Kim. Now, I'm going to start with you as a teacher. Would you please put your finger like this, please? Yes. Come on, everybody, including you. Okay. Learning to know, come on. Say it. Learning to know. To know. That's better English. Learning to know. Yes. Learning to be. Learning to do. And then hold your hands together like this with your friends. Come on. Hold your hand. Yes, like that. Learning to live together. Okay, 감사합니다. Yes, we start. Okay. Who is taking care of the, oh, here. Where should I press? This one. Okay. So why global citizenship education? The world faces a lot of challenges, and it is not enough for education to produce individuals who can read, write, and count. Education must be also transformed and bring shared values to life. So education must fully assume its central role in helping people to forge more just, peaceful, tolerant, inclusive society. It must give people the understanding, skills, and value they need to cooperate in resolving the interconnected challenges of the 21st century. I hope this is from the first initiative, Madam. Yes, yes. And then the next one, what is actually the aim of global citizenship education? The aim, equip the learner of all ages with those value, knowledge, and skill that are based on instill respect for human rights, social justice, diversity, gender equality, and all of those written here on my back. Indonesia consists of 240 million people. We have 534 languages. We have 783 ethnic groups, and we are scattered in 17,000 islands. And we have 2.7 million teachers, and we have 51 million pupils. Imagine, if they don't live together, we fight all the time. Yes? So, as we enter the 21st century, learning how to live together, to be tolerant and respectful of diversity, how to respect another's right, and how to build a sustainable future. So the key elements for this is actually knowledge, learning to know, and then the skill, learning to be, and the value, learning to be, and learning to do, and learning to live together. These are the key values. And the challenges we have, I don't have to remind you, there are so many conflicts and competition in jobs, and also in some part of the world, the wars are still exist. Even in Indonesia, we are having these challenges of the 21st century. What is the unique character and individual of human being which is associated with problems and also anonymity that is created by contemporary developments. So these are all the challenges: the tension between tradition and modernity, the tension between the need for competition, and then the tension between extraordinary expansion of knowledge and human beings' capacity to assimilate, the tension between spiritual and material. I like to ask the ladies here, do you want to have a rich husband or an honest husband? Honest. Very good for Korea. Yeah, give a big applause for the ladies in Korea. In my village, a lot of women would like to have a rich husband. Even though not very honest, but rich is important. That is also a challenge. What's the role of contribution of education confronting these challenges? Education plays a leading role in the formation and development of human and social resources of a nation. So, education contributes to the enhancement of friendly relation among countries on the basis of respect for the principle of equality, self-determination, implementation of appropriate measure, aim at enhancing world peace and attainment of international cooperation. But ladies and gentlemen, I am a teacher. How are we going to implement this among our pupils? You know, with different religions, with different tribes, with different languages. How? Yes? So, I thank the Korean leader, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, three priority areas. Put every child in school. In school meaning maybe formal education or non-formal education. Improve the quality of education. What is quality of education? Learning to know? No, not only that. Learning to be? No, not only that. Learning to do? No, not only that. But learning to live together. Foster global citizenship. So the competencies, certainly personal competencies, interpersonal, intercultural, and global. And competencies for personal development is awareness of one's own value, their foundation, your tradition, your religion, your customs, your habits, conscious of one's own perspective and ability to adopt other culture, other point of view, and ability to monitor and appropriately modify one's behavior. And competence for interpersonal development is awareness of one's own strengths and weaknesses and interaction with the other people. Sensitivity to the verbal and nonverbal behavior of others. You know, in my country, it is not very polite to go, oh, you are very good. Oh, no, it's not good. Or, you are very good. Oh, no, it's not good. How do you do that? You have got to do it like this. You are very good. This is the way. So, when we say, okay, this is very bad in one island of the country. This means, I want you. And it means a lot when you say, I want you. So this is the non-verbal. So we have to understand this. The intercultural competencies, understanding the concept of cultural relativism, contrast value, cultural shock, awareness of the organizing patterns of one's home culture, awareness of the organizing patterns of one's host culture, ability to analyze conflict between culturally different people in terms of different values, assumption, expectation, and lifestyle. And global competencies, I wish that, Madam, you are going to elaborate this. This is not my competence. Or maybe you, sir, could also explain to us, but the perspective consciousness, that is awareness of sources and limitation of one's own outlook on life, plus awareness of the outlook of others. So the essence of learning to live together is knowledge, value, skills for international, intercultural and community cooperation, and peace. Basic learning needs for living together is social participation, the ability to become good citizen, implementing human rights, to respect other culture, the mastery of languages, the mastery of science, access to ICT. And I'm going to put one more, respect women. It's very important. Man, listen to this. This is what my mother said, respect your wife. And I agree, you know. I will not be able to come here, otherwise my wife say, you go. This is the sources of my material, UNESCO, International Bureau of Education. Thank you for FCU, Mr. Utak, and also the role of global education and my paper on building culture peace through learning to live together in peace and harmony. Assalamualaikum. Thank you very much. Hamsamida.
Thank you, Pak Arief, for your very passionate, inspiring, and yet educational introduction. I'm sure you have questions. Please hold on that. We'll have enough time. I didn't know that this means something, so I should be very careful. As Indonesians do when you're in Jakarta.
In Java, it's okay.
In Java, it's okay?
Yeah, but in a remote place of other island, that is very bad.
What about Yogyakarta?
Yogyakarta, you should go like this.
Okay. How many languages are being spoken in Indonesia, you said?
I speak 3 languages, but Indonesia have 553 languages. Different. It's not dialect, but it's languages. You know.
And how many islands do you have?
17,000.
And how many students, you said?
51 million.
So more than the whole Korean population. It's amazing. Huh? So that's why I better understand why you are so keen on learning to live together.
Yes,
so,
but whether it's big population or small population, we have to respect all countries.
Of course, yes. I have many questions for you, but I will reserve those until we finish the discussion from the panel. So without further ado, may I now invite Ms. Minjeong Kim. Please tell us where we stand in terms of GCE as an agenda and where we are going. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Arief. I really don't know now what to do with my presentation because yours was so brilliant. And I think that I can actually just pack up my bag and go home. Thank you for really setting a wonderful stage for what global citizenship education is all about. So my presentation is going to come across as being rather boring, dull, and bureaucratic, coming from the UN and not being a teacher myself. So I hope you will bear with me for the next 15, 20 minutes. I would just like to give you a context of where it started, this conversation around global citizenship education within the international community. And it is very much linked to what you see up on the screen up there. It emerged as one of the 3 priorities that Dr. Arief also briefly touched upon earlier in his presentation. It comes from the Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Ban Ki-moon's Global Education First initiative, where he set 3 priorities that he wanted the world to achieve by 2015. I just wanted to also perhaps recall what some of the sessions that were yesterday. I don't know if some of you were here yesterday and you had attended some of the special sessions. And if you did, then I'm sure you have heard a lot about how technology is going to be changing the way we live our lives and the world around us. And I was particularly inspired by the futurist, Mr. Thomas Frey of the Da Vinci Institute. He laid out a future that sounded almost like science fiction to me. But I'm sure it's coming because many of the things I think that he had talked about maybe a decade or 2 decades ago are slowly coming through thanks to technological advancement. And what my main takeaway from the brilliant speeches from yesterday was that actually maybe the changes that we talk about that are happening in the world is actually happening a lot more faster than what we might have anticipated. And this is very much linked to why we are advocating for global citizenship education for the world that we want to have in the future. you would have also heard a lot about creativity and a lot of references on the type of education and training that would be required to foster creativity among young people in order to help them to do better in a knowledge-based economy and society. They also talked a lot about the innovative ways that educational and training institutions in countries around the globe, I think we had professors and heads of educational universities here yesterday talking about this a lot, on how they are cultivating creativity among their students. So you may be wondering, sitting here, where does global citizenship actually fit into it? Well, Dr. Arief actually gave a brilliant presentation, so he gave quite a bit of the rationale on why we need global citizenship education, and more importantly, why that has to lead to help us to live together. Anyway, before I go into this conversation, I just wanted to recall the key message of this global forum, actually, which states that competitiveness of human resources should not be restricted to a small portion of the global population, but that everyone, not just a few number of elites in very specialized fields, but everyone must be able to survive, to compete in this very competitive world that we're living in now. And this is sort of a segue to what the United Nations and UNESCO is promoting as what we term as education for all, which is that education is a fundamental human right. And in an increasingly globalized, interdependent, interconnected, and competitive world, a good quality education is one of the most important equalizing factor for all of us. So before I get into actually talking about global citizenship education, I had actually wanted to show a short film about the Secretary General's initiative and why it's so important to kind of understand and situate what we are talking about as global citizenship education within the context of the global education, the state of global education today. And I'm just wondering if we can show the video now.
The world is gathering to address our most vexing challenges. The answers we need are through our future doctors who will cure HIV/AIDS and other devastating diseases. They are through our future scientists who will find new ways to feed our communities. The answers come from our future engineers who will transform the way we live and work. And they come from our activists and humanitarians who will help shape our society for the better. The answers are found in our schools. The answers are inspired by our teachers, and they come directly from the minds and imagination of our students. To our children, we have made promises, and in the past decade, we have seen tremendous progress. We have enrolled more children in primary school than ever before. We have reduced gender disparities, and we have improved access to secondary education.
Être journaliste.
Être journaliste, oui.
Peut-être même être président de la République.
We know now more than ever that no matter where you live, the answer is to invest in education first. However, global aid to education has stalled. Funding has been on a downward spiral in recent years and has put our progress and our future at risk. 58 million children of primary school age are denied their right to education. 250 million children are unable to read, write, or count, whether they have been to school or not. And there is a global shortage of professional, well-trained, and supported teachers. This demands our urgent attention, but the finance gap for basic education is now at $26 billion per year. If we want to reduce hunger, eliminate poverty, preserve our environment, and build the world we want, we must invest in the answers, our students.
I love going to school because I want to be a doctor.
Around the world, organizations are working on the ground to provide quality education for all. They are learning from each other, finding local answers and global solutions. And one initiative has brought them together to fulfill our promises. The United Nations Secretary-General's Global Education First Initiative. Jeffy brings together champion countries who are fighting to put education at the top of the development agenda where it belongs. It is uniting organizations that are solving problems and finding answers in real time and in local context.
They say, if you deny a child to school, you deny that child's future. So what can you do without a future?
But we recognize that getting children into school is not enough. Jeffy is raising its voice for quality education for children, youth, and adults. And it is advocating that curricula everywhere must be designed for the 21st century. Jeffy unites to promote tolerance, peace, and respect for diversity to create global citizens. Because while our challenges are interconnected, so are our solutions. We must invest in education first.
Thank you. So to get back to the topic of this session, why global citizenship education? In 2012, two major events unfolded at the UN, contributing to this increased interest in global citizenship education within the international community. And one of it, as you just saw in the film, was the Secretary General's Education First initiative. And the other was the Rio +20 outcome and the Sustainable Development Goals. In a way, these two events actually represented to the international community a unique opportunity to initiate some sort of a paradigm shift in education, a shift that would facilitate to instill in learners a sense of collective global responsibility for our common humanity. So when the Secretary General launched this Global Education First initiative, it was based on the premise that I think that he himself personally had experienced as a child growing up during the war. And he really believed that education was the basis for the world to eradicate poverty and inequalities and to make sure that every human being on this planet could lead a life of dignity. And he said that this was only going to be possible if we actually allow or enable the current and future generations to receive a quality education and to foster a sense of global citizenship within them. And the other event that I mentioned earlier was the Rio +20 conference outcome, which called actually the member states of the United Nations to start defining a set of universal goals to address in a balanced manner the three dimensions of sustainable development, which is economic growth, social justice, and economic stewardship. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Mdgs, the Millennium Development Goals. Can you raise your hands if you're familiar with it? Okay, I see that there are a few. So actually the UN is not doing a very good job because it is a set of goals that has been leading the world in how development should be for the past 14 years. It was adopted in year 2000 at the UN by all the member states. It had a set of 7 goals, and these goals are supposed to be expiring next year at the end of 2015. The world has set 7 goals to achieve in 15 years, and unfortunately, I mean, we have a lot of successes, as you also watch in the film, that in terms of one of the goals, which was to provide access to free and universal access to all children of primary age to education. Some of it has been achieved, but unfortunately, we still have 58 million children who are still out of school. So that same thing goes for many of the other goals. A lot of it has been achieved, but still there are lots of unfinished business that still has to be carried on. And so the member states of the United Nations said, we want to have a different set of goals that would reflect the unfinished business from the Millennium Development Goals, but then to take it a bit further, to make it more aspirational and more transformative, and that it really integrates all 3 dimensions of sustainable development. And so in the past few years, the past couple of years, actually, the member states in the UN have been really trying to see how they can come up with a new set of goals, and they have been heavily negotiating. And in September this year, they did propose a set of sustainable development goals. And so how does it actually situate in all this the global citizenship education that we're talking about? And I think one of the issues, one of the reasons why the Secretary General has decided to include global citizenship as one of his 3 priorities is because he understands that the trends, the current and future global trends are so complex, and that without a sense of common responsibility, we will never be able to reach the goals that we are going to set ourselves for. And in that sense, I just wanted to present a little bit about what are some of the global trends and how it could actually impact all of us. Because as we know, a lot of the challenges these days that we're faced with goes beyond borders. I mean, Indonesia by itself is kind of a mini world. But so you can imagine if there are 193 countries, and out of those 193 countries that are part of the UN, many of them are like as complex by itself at the micro level as Indonesia, and you multiply it to the global level, and you can understand that many of these challenges are spilling over the national boundaries. So what are some of the global challenges that we are facing and that we are dealing with at the UN? It's such as things like migration, increasing inequality, insecurity, social exclusion, climate change, and then we are getting a significant number of fragile and at-risk states. I mean, I'm sure you see it every day in the news, what's happening in Syria, in Iraq, in Chad, in Central African Republic, the Ebola crisis in West Africa, and so forth. And we all know that this challenge is not bound by national boundaries. We've heard stories about how Ebola is not only contained in the 3 countries where it started, but it is those who are outside of the 3 countries are also being impacted. So despite the progress that we have been making in Millennium Development Goals, we also realize that the demand for basic necessities are still there. Basic necessities such as education, access to health, access to water, food, energy, so on. The global population is projected, according to the UNFPA count, to increase by another 2 billion by 2050. It means that the world population will become 9 billion by 2050. And 70% of this population will be living in urban areas, which is going to cause us a new set of issues, very different from if we had actually a more equitable distribution of population in rural and urban areas. But what is really worrisome about the growth in population is that the resources of this planet are not unlimited. It is not infinite. And so what does it mean when there's going to be this continued growth in population? Because currently, we have a total of 842 million people who were actually suffering from chronic hunger between 2011 and 2013. I mean, those are the latest statistics that we have. So this is 1 in 8 people living in this world. But then we also know that on the other hand, we also have millions of people who are actually suffering or struggling to deal with overweight, obesity, and other diseases as a result of unhealthy lifestyle choices. So where is the balance in all this? On one hand, you have people who don't have enough to eat. On the other hand, you have access and there's such inequality and equity, even when it comes to basic needs as food. We also have 2.5 billion people who access lack to modern sanitation. And you might be wondering, some of you might know that November 19 is actually World Toilet Day that the UN celebrates or commemorates. I would not say celebrate because it's not a nice thing to celebrate. And some people might wonder, why World Toilet Day of all the things? But it's 2.5 billion people who don't have access to toilets or sanitation facilities. And by itself, you can say, okay, well, that's awful. But then it has other consequences. There are diseases, there are illnesses that come with lack of sanitation. And we have about 2,000 children dying almost every day related to unsafe drinking water and diseases borne by water and so forth. So when you think about it, and the implications that would have socially and economically, is actually quite tremendous. And we have 748 million people who are still drawing their water from sources which are not properly treated. So they might have access to water, but they will fall sick from drinking that water. So based on the current patterns of the way we produce and consume at the moment, it is projected by 2030 that the world will require 50% more food, 45% more energy, and 30% more water. And I have colleagues who are also working on how much of all this is going to waste because we don't consume properly and we don't manage how we consume properly. Access to clean and modern energy also must continue to expand to reach 1.3 people who are still without electricity today. And about some 40% of the world's population are still cooking with wood and coal and charcoal or even animal waste. And I've seen this in Tanzania where I used to work before. If you go into certain parts of Tanzania, you have women cooking in small huts with animal waste, and they will fall sick from the smoke and the toxic fumes that were coming out from the animal waste they were burning in order to cook a meal for their family. So what we are saying is sustainable development is not only going to be achieved through technological solutions, of which there are many, and they are becoming perhaps more affordable and perhaps more widespread. And then it's not also going to be solved by legal frameworks, and goodness knows that we have enough legal frameworks to make all this happen. Or financial instruments. These are all important, we don't deny it, but we need more than that. Because we say the many interconnected global challenges and the finite resources of this planet, we need to call for some sort of fundamental changes on how each and every one of us think and we act vis-a-vis our fellow human beings and how we deal with the world around us. And I just want to say a quote of the Secretary General, which he likes to use quite a lot as well, when he talks about climate change and some of the global challenges and so forth. He always says there can be a plan A, a plan B, and maybe even a plan C, but there's only one planet Earth, and we have a joint responsibility towards it. So a bit more on why is global citizenship education? To come to the real issue of the day. Well, UNESCO is leading the technical work on trying to define and really trying to see how this can shift from a theoretical concept to something that's concretely implementable in whether it's in a formal school setting or in a non-formal education setting or in an informal learning setting. And the way it has sort of tried to define global citizenship education up to now, based on actually bringing together a lot of technical experts, and I think that expert meeting, the first one, took place in Korea, in Seoul, already back in 2012, was it, or 13? And what they came out with is that global citizenship education is a framing paradigm to express a collective purpose of education to develop the knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes that learners need to actually learn, to understand, to secure a world that will be more just, peaceful, tolerant, inclusive, secure, and sustainable. And so it's also saying what actually Dr. Arief touched upon earlier as well, that it has to be more than just cognitive skills that we talked a lot about yesterday as well. And I was also particularly touched by one of the presenters yesterday, Michael, Dr. Kim might recall his name, he had a long, complicated name. And he was talking also about how it was not only cognitive skills, but really about soft skills, what he calls soft skills, which I think a lot of others also call life skills, which are really about values and attitudes and other skills that not necessarily might be linked to just the reading and writing and counting that we really focus on so much in schools and for the tests that we do in schools. But it's really about these values and attitudes that can actually create some sort of social transformation, that people are empowered to bring about the change that they would like to see. And the way UNESCO promotes global citizenship education is that it's more than just for schools and for young people and children, but that it has to also involve adults. It takes a lifelong perspective on trying to promote global citizenship education, that adults are also just as implicated in this as anyone else. And I think part of this forum is talking quite a lot about the aging population and how to deal with that and so forth. And so it's that we also need to make sure that we don't forget a large part of the population, and we should not only be talking about children and youth who are going to school. It also recommends that delivery of global citizenship education should be in all modes and venues of delivery. So it's not only restricting to a school curriculum. And this might be actually good news for some of the teachers and maybe students sitting here, because I'm sure some of you might be sitting there thinking, oh no, this is another fancy name for another subject area that we have to try to fit into a very heavy curriculum and to do more tests and so forth. So it's not really trying to increase the burden on national education systems, but really to see how it can be integrated in different ways at the formal, non-formal, and informal settings. And it's also advocating global citizenship education to be delivered as an integral part of, of existing subject matters. I mean, for instance, like social studies, health, science, different science subjects, and so forth. And that it could be an independent subject, but not necessarily, because as I said, I mean, curriculums all around the world share a similar challenge, that is that they are all overburdened with too many subject areas. So global citizenship education basically is trying to inspire action, partnerships, dialogues, and cooperation. And we are saying that it should have a multifaceted approach, and it should apply concepts and methodologies that already exist in education for human rights, peace education, civics education, education for sustainable development. I'm sure many of you have heard of that. And also education for international understanding, which is kind of the raison d'etre of the center of UPSEU. So what is next for global citizenship education? Where are we now with the UN system, and where is this going to go? And we're still saying that there's still a lot of work to be done. I mean, in a way, it's a new paradigm, but at the same time, when you look at the content of global citizenship education, these are issues that have already existed in education. I mean, for decades they have, and it's called different names, and there's still sort of a discussion, a conversation going on how it should be referred to, because many people still try to refer it to just a human rights education because it's already existed for decades, or peace education, or education for tolerance, or learning to live together, or education for sustainable development. Or in Europe, there is a big movement on development education, and they would prefer to just continue with that name. So there's still this global conversation that's going on, which UNESCO is trying to bring together and try to make some sense of. But for that, we still need to build a lot of evidence. And there is evidence out there, but still it has not always been well collated and documented. And in order to also convince policymakers or even practitioners or the public such as yourself, evidence is important. And so this is what we're trying to focus on as well, to really gather the evidence and document them on what are the benefits of global citizenship education in helping students to gain the knowledge and the skills and the attitudes, and how it brings about the kind of behavior that would allow them to get more engaged globally and to have the competency to flourish in a complex world that we're living in. And as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of a fragmented concept, because as I said, different constituents prefer to call it, to give it different names. So what we're also trying to do is to strengthen the advocacy through the partnership. And from the Global Education First initiative, because we have the Secretary General who is firmly behind this concept, because he himself considers to be one of the lucky, successful global citizens. He was a child of war from Korea that was completely devastated and poor, and he still talks about how the UN came into Korea after the war and provided education and security, and that's how he managed to be Secretary General that he is today. And so we're trying to use that to bring different partners and trying to see how we can make sure that global citizenship education in whatever form is well integrated in the future development agenda that I was mentioning earlier today. And we also know that if we cannot measure anything, very likelihood it will never happen. In a development agenda, there's so many competing priorities and needs, and we know that if we don't say that we're going to measure the progress and how it's being implemented, it will most likely not be implemented. And so UNESCO is also leading with Brookings Institute to come up with a set of indicators on how to measure global citizenship education outcomes. And we're trying to make sure that these indicators, once they're developed, are going to be integrated in the global agenda as well. And since young people, and I see several of you here, are going to be the custodians of this planet, I mean, you're the ones who will still be here. Perhaps I consider myself among the older generation, even after we're all gone. And so what we're trying to do from the Global Education First initiative is also to involve young people around the world in taking part in these conversations to make sure that they are part of the process that's going to be defining what global education citizenship is and how it's going to be measured. And we have a group of young youth advocates from 18 different countries that we're working with in order to push out this advocacy key messages. And UNESCO, as the technical UN agency working on global citizenship education, is working with a lot of other partners in trying to continue to mainstream global citizenship education in existing education programs at the country level. But at the same time, like I said, it's not something that we're pushing to have separate subject areas, but really trying to identify what are some of the key entry points that already exist in order to promote this concept. I think, and last but not least, UNESCO and its partners will continue to give emphasis on the professional development of educators, because as we all know, without their involvement, we are not going to make any of this a success. And I think, Arief, you mentioned that when we met earlier. So in conclusion, I would just like to say that changes are inevitable. And the world is changing very rapidly, and it's becoming more complex, and it's becoming a lot more competitive. And I think it's a lot harder for young people these days than perhaps when I was younger. And so for us to not only just say that we survive, but that we really fulfill our full potential and that we're able to live a life of dignity, is that we have to start from the understanding that we share a common humanity, and that as citizens of this planet, that means we are global citizens, we need to know, I think, how to deal with the various complexities that we are faced with today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. You have avoided eye contact with me, but thank you very much for very rich and informative presentation. Before handing over to our discussion, can you tell us where and how this initiative, global citizenship education, will be integrated as part of next global sustainable development goals, when and how?
At the moment, there's a set of proposed sustainable development goals, and in that goal, it is a subject area that's been included under one of the targets. I think it's the same for the education agenda that has been proposed by the education stakeholders. But like I said, this is we've just won a battle, because the member states of the United Nations are still going to be negotiating for another year on what is ultimately going to be the final development agenda, which is going to be adopted at the summit next year in September. So I think if we're really passionate about making sure that global citizenship education remains in the global agenda, I think we have to still be very vigilant.
Thank you very much. For that, I understand the government of Korea is hosting World Education Forum in May, Incheon next year. So the world education leaders will gather in Korea, and this GC will be strongly featured in the debate. And with that, I think they can influence this global discourse. So at the end of the day, this will become part of next Sustainable Development Goal, of which education has a strong standing, a standalone goal. For those of you who are not familiar with MDG, which Ms. Kim asked you about, MDG stands for Millennium Development Goals, as Ms. Kim explained to us. It was internationally agreed goal back in the year 2000. It has 8 sub-goals, including poverty reduction, which I understand is the first goal. Second goal is universal primary education, and third one is gender parity, and so on and so forth. So the target is next year, 2015. This is still another reason why the World Education Community decided to have the Global Education or World Education Forum in Korea. So the aim of the World Education Forum is twofold. On the one hand, it concludes the MDG, because next year is a target year, and at the same time setting or another education agenda for the next 15 years. So for your information, the next development goal is no longer called the Millennium Development Goals, rather it's called Sustainable Development Goals. We have yet to see? We don't know yet. But as of now, it's called SDGs, 17 of them in the draft, just for your information. Again, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. Just to another note, for those of you who you still young, and those of you who kind of wish to pursue a career in UN, I think Ms. Kim could be a very good role model. Based in New York, and through a very competitive process, Ms. Kim has proven her capability as a very competent UN official. So I would suggest the young generation Koreans to follow suit. And if you don't mind, I would ask them to meet with you individually after the meeting. Will you spare some time for them? Yes. Thank you. So with that, because we are running a bit late, I realize to discuss, if you agree, we initially agreed to have 10 minutes each, but can I ask you to spend more or less than 5 minutes, and another 5 minutes I'll give you towards the end. So with that, may I invite, hold on, Dr. Chung. I would invite first Professor Park. He is a renowned educationist and anthropologist. So if you have any comments or reflection on these 2 presentations, please share them with us. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Well, as the scholar on this panel, I think that the way I assess the 2 preceding presenters' presentations is that the first presentation involving key values for learning presents a very rather optimistic view. The second presentation regarding GEFI and the future of GCE, it seems that we have a clear focus and direction, but as a discussant, I'd like to offer more of a scholarly view, and scholars by nature are a very pessimistic group, so I don't want to rain on their parade, but I do want to provide my opinions or my take on the preceding presentations. Okay, first of all, Dr. Rachman's presentation on key values for learning with regard to the case of Indonesia, found it very interesting. I think his mention about the vastness of the territory and the diversity of the population, on the one hand, I could understand the need for GCE in that respect, of coming together and learning together. But at the same time, I am kind of suspicious about whether there might be culturally rooted interpretations of GCE that may be different from the recipients. So in that sense, when we talk about the notion of the global in itself, within that notion, has conflicting sub-themes. On the one hand, there's the tendency for convergence, like access to ICT has enabled us to come closer. But at the same time, it has exposed a tendency toward divergence as we become more aware of our differences as we come together. So that's kind of a conflict that's embedded within our discussions of the global. So in that context, I hope that GCE doesn't fall, the discussions about GCE do not fall into a trap of idealistic optimism or an imagined solidarity. We've had, preceding GCE, we've had EIU and ESD, these waves of initiatives that come, that arise in different decades. But for these initiatives not to remain as fancy catchphrases, we have to do more than just to hammer these concepts in a propagandist way. So it has to be backed up by action, and I think that's the key area that we should emphasize for success, is at the ground level, what can we do? I think Madame Kim mentioned some ideas for us to work on in order to actually make GCE practicable. But I'd like to add a few more points onto what she has presented. One is the idea of GCE has to, it's something that extends beyond national borders. Of course, it's brought on, the idea is brought on by transnational challenges, such as the aforementioned Ebola outbreaks, the ongoing inequality and political insecurities around the world. But I think we have to first conceptualize the very notion of global citizenship education, not as something that's out of reach. So in practical terms, we may have to regard the term as having to do with civic duty or civic volunteerism that has expanded to the global level. So when I talk about civic duty or civic volunteerism, that's putting your collective before yourself and following up with practice. So if we extend that notion to the global level, I think that will neatly come into view of how we conceptualize GCE more than something of an abstract term. The second point I'd like to make is that for global citizenship education to pursue a more practical path and towards success, it has to be, it has to start with self-critique. It's, rather than just projecting rosy pictures of the future, we have to begin with a very critical and realistic self-assessment, which will serve as a basis for our consciousness-raising experience. And that will lead to a broadening of the scope of our worldviews. And the very idea of broadening our worldviews, I think that coincides with the spirit of global citizenship education. So this consciousness-raising experience also will enable us to undergo transformative experience, which will then inspire people to get involved in action. Third point I'd like to make is that Madame Kim addressed the need for the next generation to acquire certain skills to address common global problems. I cannot agree more. But purely from the education sector, what should we do? Now that's a realistic issue, and because the landscape of education and the recipient group, which is the teachers, the parents, and students, may have different agendas. It would be more practical if we consider it as somewhat of a lifelong learning experience rather than something that is focused primarily on the school. Because children may be taught about peace and tolerance in schools, but if they go out in the real world and they see their parents acting in intolerable ways, sending conflicting messages, I think that will completely wipe out what has been learned in the schools. So we should approach it as a lifelong learning experience rather than just what should be taught in the schools. And also within the schools, I think there is increasing pressure to bring the education sector to properly address global issues. And to talk about acquiring creative skills to address common problems, it has to be dealt with in all school subjects. We cannot set up a new particular subject that is completely devoted to global citizenship education. That would be an additional burden on the teachers and on the recipient students as well. So it should not be something that's treated as a separate subject, but I think the very idea of global citizenship education should permeate all subjects, so that social studies, or whether you're teaching social studies or the natural sciences, students will naturally have exposure to global needs and global connections that has to do with curricular content. So these are just my points. I hope I didn't run too much over time.
Not really. I really liked your comments. I think Professor Park, you gave us a very critical and yet insightful comments, which I find very useful, especially your last point about the subject matter. I think Ms. Kim also mentioned that in her presentation, to some extent, Park Arief also, which is rather than having a separate subject, it may be better to have GC embedded in all subject area, or integrate or permeate it, as you mentioned. So this practicality, action-oriented approach would be something we need. So naturally, I would invite Dr. Utak Chung, who is heading the APSEU, to give us some a view from practitioners' viewpoint. Okay, can you only 5 minutes or so?
Thank you very much. As to speak already mentioned that the global citizenship education is very timely and relevant in this 21st century. And globalization is every corner of the world. So the goal of education should change. Goal of education should be nurturing global citizen and building the more just, peaceful, tolerant, and inclusive society. In this perspective, Korea is very, very unique country. But we traditionally believe that Korea is a homogeneous society, but today is multicultural. We are becoming more multicultural society. But we have an advantage. We are not a superpower or the small country. We are middle power nation. And also Korea already we has experienced the rapid transformation from poverty to prosperity. So in this experience and our unique position, we can initiate, we lead this global citizenship education in global society. the UNESCO World Education Forum, which will be held in Incheon, Korea, May 2015, is a great example. So I believe this year and next year, 2014 and 15, is very critical moment for Korea and the Korean government to initiate, to lead this global citizenship education in the world. So how to initiate or how to build this very important issue. If UNESCO World Education Forum will adopt the global citizenship education as one target of post-EFA, then it means the global citizenship education will be promoted for 15 years by 2030. So today, in this forum, I would like to propose Korean government, Korean society to make two pledges. The first, the Korean needs to set up a special fund for global citizenship education with UNESCO. I hope other countries could also make contribution in this special fund that shall support global citizenship education of the world. The second point, the Korean government has to establish or designate a global center for global citizenship education for its systematic implementation on global scale. As a coordinating hub, the center will coordinate or to be a network for policymakers, academics, teachers, and young people on this field, global citizenship education. And also the center will facilitate network building and sharing information among the stakeholders of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chung. At this point, I would like to suggest, ladies and gentlemen, to give a big hand to our speakers and discussants. Before I open up the floor, I like the Dr. Utak Chung's proposal, two proposals actually, money and organization. But I wonder if there is anybody from the government of Korea who listened to you, your message. Anybody? Raise your hand. Again, okay. Mr. Kim, can you promise to us that you will work on these two proposals? I know that you are not the final decision maker, but would you convey this message to highest authority? Yes or no?
Yes. Yes, I promise.
Thank you. Great. So we are making progress. Now I realize we have only 20 minutes or so left, so I'm very time conscious. So I'll try to speed up our exchange. So the rule from now on is for any speaker, I'll give only a minute and a half, less than 2 minutes, in which you introduce yourself, who you are, and what the point is. I don't welcome any speech. So this applies to all our speakers. I'm sorry. I'm sure that you have points to respond to our discussions, some provocative points, especially from Professor Park. But anyhow, so hold on that. And I gave 3 questions to our two speakers. So I want you to tell us what the question is and what your answer is in 2 minutes' time. But before that, let me collect a few comments from the floor, and then I'll give floor to our distinguished panelists. So who would like to go first? Raise your hand. Don't be shy. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to, I'm from Peije University in Daejeon. I already submitted my question to the floor, to the desk. I'd like to ask first to Dr. Arief Rachman from Indonesia. Terima kasih. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. And I would like to know about the social values of your country, integrating 17,000 islands, and with 530 languages. I want to know with the audiences here. And second, Miss or Madam, it is confused. Is your responsibility, I think, the chairman, Miss or Madam, clarify on this.
You can use both, I understand.
Yeah. Sing Miss or Madam, I'm confusing. Yeah. And I'd like to ask a few questions to Ms. Minjeong Kim as regards the Millennium Goals. We understand that it's going to be finished next year. Then how much is been achieved by sub-goals? We would like to know. Would you please elaborate on this? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Yes. Binna, please.
Hi, I'm Becca Chung from UN Academic Impact Korea. And I truly understand that all the UNESCO is more focusing on the primary education. So as I was hearing from your ideas, you are more focusing how to implement GCE for primary sectors. I mean primary education. But I'm from the higher education sector. So I would like to hear from your open ideas for the higher education sectors that how they can implement the GCE. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can ask in Korean. Don't be afraid. If you don't feel comfortable speaking English, you can ask in Korean. 우리말로 하세요. I would one more commentator. Yes, the lady in the back. Use your microphone.
I would like to make a point about the third speaker, Mr. Chung. You said that global education should follow the case of South Korea with all the development we had, but I think Korea's current education system is so full of competition that global education shouldn't and couldn't fit into it. So I would like to ask you whether the Global Education Forum should follow the example of Korea. Thank you.
Not sure I understood your question. Anyway, perhaps one more question. Yes.
Thank you for your wonderful speech. And I had a question towards Ms. Kim and Professor Park regarding the issue of, I heard that you said global education, global citizenship education should be a lifelong learning process rather than a single subject. And I would like to hear more about how it could be implemented, especially in the current Korean education system.
Thank you. Perhaps at this point, I would like to ask Pak Arief, followed by Ms. Kim, to respond to you. The reason I'm calling Pak Arief in Indonesian, Bahasa Indonesia, it means mentor or great teacher.
No, Papa is Mr.
Yes.
Or father.
It's very confusing.
No, it's not confusing.
In Korean, 선생님. So I call him Pak Arief. So.
Thank you very much. On social values, how we create this global citizenship, and how to integrate the 240 million people It is a long history, you know. We were colonized for 300 years, and in 1928 we found out that we cannot survive to have a country. Otherwise, we have got to get together. So in 1928, there was a Congress of Youth saying that we are one nation, one language, and one country. And then after that, after 17 years, we got our independence. So that was the benefit of all our struggle to become a country. And then we produced, I think it's very intelligent, our founding fathers, we produced the philosophy of Indonesia. It is called 5 Principles. Believe in God, and then number 2 is on human security, of being justice, and number 3, democracy, and number 4, nationalism, and number 5, social justice. So all the development in Indonesia should go to these 5 principles, you know. And then we elaborate from the first principle, for example, believe in God. What does it mean, believe in God? We have to respect all congregation, you know, whether you are Christian, Buddhist, Hindu, or traditional beliefs, Muslim, we have got to respect each other. And then that is put in the law. And then the law produce in the development of education curriculum. And the curriculum produce not only mission, but also vision and then action. And then the end of this is how to evaluate a student. What do you call by a good student? A good student is not only a person who is good here on his brain, who is not only competitive, who is not only creative, but a good student is a student who respects their mother, respect their parents, and then create good tradition, keep the good tradition of his own, and also respect others. And then thirdly, we have got to see, if he is a good student, we have got to see the improvement of knowledge, because we are living in this planet. So we know Korea very well from your films, from your K-pop, you know, and we know a lot about Korea. I don't know whether Korea knows a lot about Indonesia. Probably you know a lot about Bali, yes. But if you go to Indonesia, Bali is not Indonesia. It's only one small island. We have 17,000 islands. I myself has a very difficult time to understand my own country. Yes, and then the last one, so number 1 is their cognitive ability, and number 2 is the affective, the behavior, and number 3 is the skill, how they implement all the social values. But I would like to react to Mr. Professor Park about optimism and pessimism. I am, as a teacher, I cannot be pessimistic, you know, even though how they don't understand. If my students said, you know, I don't understand you, it's okay. You don't understand me, but you have got to live together and you have got to be happy. Understanding does not make people happy and be able to live together. So our perspective of life, I agree with you, lifelong learning is very, very important. And I learned a lot from Mr. Utak Chung. With APCU, we have a lot of programs to flourish this. And then if I may, I will answer the second question on the academic impact. The university level, Madam. So how are we going to implement this in the tertiary level, in university levels? There are 3 important missions of universities. Number 1 is the improvement of knowledge, you know, the finding new knowledge, new creativity. But secondly is the seriousness of research. And based on research, you develop countries. So hopefully all around the world, we develop this world based on research, on data. It's very important. And thirdly, a university must not only produce people being an academician, professor or doctor or something like that. It's not important, but how much these professors and doctors could influence those political leaders and also business circle. So we have a triangle working together: the politician, the academician, and the business circle for the prosperity of the country. So I think it is not only the primary level. And then my last comment is, don't forget, family, parents are very important. So the quality of parents, parenting, it is developed very, very vigorously in Indonesia. We have a lot of parents that do not know that education can help their children to be able to live happily. Yes, not only to make money. Yes, it's very important. And secondly, the NGO, non-formal education, vocational schools, we have got to respect them. And then lastly is the formal education. But I have to be optimistic, because with pessimism, yes, as an academician, I have got to be prudent and not pessimistic, but what I mean is to be very, very careful and not to be hasty, but to improve this world, we have got to be optimistic. Inshallah, we will come to the happy ending of this planet. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, Pak Arief. When it comes to optimism, I will let you know you are not alone. I'm also a very much optimist. I'm sure that Professor Park is also an optimist. But for the sake of conversation and discussion, he talked about pessimism versus optimism. Now, Ms. Kim, please.
Thank you. So I'll just respond to the first question about the MDGs achievement. So the Millennium Development Goals had eight goals and 21 targets, if I'm not mistaken. I'm very bad with memorizing numbers, so please forgive me if I might be a bit off. How much has it been achieved? It's really difficult to say, because on one hand, if you look at the global level, you could say, and if you look at the different goals, because each goal has different, has been achieved in a different way, and to what extent each of the goals have been achieved differs very widely. If I just take the education goals that I'm more familiar with than all the other goals, is that MDG Goal 2, which was a universal primary education, so it was basically to offer free and compulsory basic education to all children of that primary school age. There's been a lot of progress. I mean, when in 2000, the out-of-school children numbered more than 280 million. Now, I just mentioned, as you saw in the film, that we're counting that there are about 58 million children that are still out of school. About half of these 58 million children will never actually set foot in a classroom. So they will join the 270-something million adults who are illiterate. And so there is an issue, because there is this perpetuating cycle of illiteracy and poverty and so on. The other education-related goal in the MDGs is the gender parity goal, whether there are equal number of girls and boys that have enrolled in school. And this has been achieved to a great extent. This is looking at the global level. If you go down to the regional level, again, between regions, there's quite a lot of difference. I mean, if you look at just Asia Pacific, which is the biggest region, and I don't envy Dr. Kim's responsibility as UNESCO Regional Office Director. I mean, if you look at the statistics coming, the data from South Asia compared to East Asia, I mean, it's a huge gap. I mean, you look at even within South Asia if you look at gender parity goal data for Bangladesh and Pakistan, again, you see a huge difference. And Pakistan is not doing well at all in gender parity, whereas Bangladesh has made huge progress. I mean, they're almost at 90-something%. So, and then if you look at across regions, I mean, if you try to compare sub-Saharan Africa to Asia Pacific or to Latin America to Europe, it's uncomparable. I mean, the challenges in sub-Saharan Africa are still immense, even in enrolling primary school education children. So it's a bit difficult. So we talk about globally very often, but I think what is really important for us as we move forward and we think about, even when we talk about globally, is that we really still have to drill down to the regional level and to the country level. Because even within countries, we know very well the urban-rural disparity is huge in many of these developing countries. I worked in Tanzania, in East Africa for a couple of years, and the disparity between the rural areas and the capital city is huge. And so you cannot, it would be wrong for us to just gloss over these differences and disparities and inequalities and inequities by just looking at the global figure. So that's the main point I wanted to make. Agree completely with Dr. Arief on what he said about, in reference to the question from the UN academic impact. I'm sorry if I gave the sort of a misinformation or miscommunication about who we're focusing on for global citizenship education. It is not only for primary education, it is really at all levels, and UNESCO, more than any other UN agencies, works at all education levels from pre-primary all the way to higher education as the education specialized agency. So if I gave that impression, I'm very sorry. We are trying to look at, and UNESCO is at the moment involved in trying to come up with age-appropriate framework on how to integrate or adapt to global citizenship education at the national level. But I just want to also emphasize, because if it didn't come out very clearly earlier in my presentation, is that we're not promoting global citizenship education wholesale. We understand that every country has a different education context and it has to be adapted. But because we are the UN and as a multilateral organization, we tend to think at the global level. But really it is up to centers like APSU at the regional level or at the national level, universities led by Rachman, that has to lead the work and actually trying to adapt what comes up at the global level and what might emerge in September 2015 as part of the development agenda. How is that going to be adapted at the country level? So even when we talk about indicators, we're talking about global indicators for measurement, but those indicators then also have to be adapted at their local context. And so this is just the message I wanted to leave behind. The question on lifelong learning, I think perhaps, especially in the current context, I would like to leave the question to Professor Park, because I think he's more of an expert than I am. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. As you want to react? Yes.
No, I'm not reacting, but there is a question which is, I think, very, very good. What if education we are currently promoting encourages youth nowadays to be aspired only for certain kinds of career path? And what if, for example, no one wants to become a farmer or fisherman, etc.? How should post-2015 education that has got to be developed? This also referred to Indonesia. A lot of students and youth move from the rural area to the big cities. And even Indonesia thinks that by being industrious country, we can become very, very rich, which we found out, some society become very imbalanced. The nature needs fishermen. The nature needs people who work in the middle of the forest. So it is really the national policy, politically, should be able to make a kind of national development plan. And then everybody should be able to create good and prestigious school. For example, we built a university in an island which is very located in Ambon, in Maluku. That's located among all the islands, and there we have a very good and excellent center for oceanography. And a lot of students, the fishermen youth, they go to that school, and then they go back to the coast and then give their knowledge of how to breed fish and how to use all the natural resources that we have. So if you don't do that, everybody wants to become lawyers. Everybody wants to become doctors, engineers, and then suddenly you will see your natural resources neglected. And I think this question is a very, very serious question, and we have got to have a very good, what I call the national plan and developing, so everybody can see, if I go to that school, I will also be able to take care of my farms. Something like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Park Arief. Well, time is more or less up, but I, as a moderator, would like to extend 5-7 minutes more, if you agree, okay? You're very engaging, and so before I ask two of our discussants if you have any final points, I will give you 1.5 minutes. But before that, if there's any burning questions, comments from the floor, I know in this country, because the Korea is hosting the World Education Forum, there will be many events leading to the World Forum, and perhaps after the forum, there may be some follow-up activity as well. So if this is a golden opportunity for those of you working on this particular issue to make your event known. Incidentally, I realize that I have my respectful teacher is in this room, Professor Jongbom Lee from Korea University. Hold on, President Kim. Professor Lee Jongbom and my ex-colleague are here in this room. If you have any event between now and May, this is time for you to announce. If microphone, and then President Kim Young-gil, please, briefly, if not. Okay, I will ask President Kim Young-gil first, and if Professor Lee, if you have any comments.
Thank you. This is a global forum. I should speak in English. I like to rather speak in Korean.
You can be bilingual.
Yeah. Anyway, global citizenship education is a very hot subject right now. The reason is Secretary Ban Ki-moon, he suggested UN academic impact he established in November 2020. And the number 6 is encouraging global citizenship through education. This is first his initiative, then followed by Jeffy in 2012 in December. Now I'm going to speak in the Korean. 우리가 시민 교육하면요, 여러 가지가 있겠지만은 딱 나는 3가지를 좀 제안하고 싶어요. 실질적으로 우리는 다 한국 시민이지만은 또 우리는 글로벌 시티즌입니다. In the 21st century, the requirement first, we have to be honest. 우리는 한국 사람이고 다 정직해야 돼요. 정직하는 것이 honesty, integrity is very important. Second, we have to live together globally. 우리는 지금요, too much competition, 자꾸 내셔널만 하는데 우리는 내셔널에서부터 글로벌 에듀케이션을 가야 돼요. 그럼 우리가 글로벌 에듀케이션 우리가 참 부족하고. 그 다음에는 세 번째는 우리 책임지는 사람. We have to responsible global citizens. 우리는 내가 쓰고 말하고 행동하는데 책임지는 사람을 길러야 합니다. 이것이 초등학교, 고등학교, 대학교까지. 저는 한동대학교를 오기 전에 카이스트에서 한 15년간 카이스트 교수를 했지만 거기는 그냥 연구만 하는 거예요. That's not for all. 우리는 초등, 중등, 고등학교부터 우리가 가정에서부터 티처에서부터 우리는 정직하고 성실한 사람, 자기가 말하고 쓰고 행동하는데 책임지는 사람. 그 다음번에는 우리만이 살려고 하지 말고 우리가 같이 더불어 사는 글로벌 에듀케이션, 글로벌리 리브 투게더. 나는 이 3가지가 내년에 행정되는 우리 한국에 하는 GCE 유네스코 포럼에서 그 하나를 좀 클리어하면 좋겠어요. 우리 한국 사람은 정직하고 성실하죠. 그 다음에 우리 한국 사람은 책임지는 사람. 또 우리는 세계와 더불어 사람. 이걸 내가 꼭 제안하고 싶어요. Thank you for your giving time. And I'm sorry for speaking in English, Korean. At least 99% is Korean. That's why I like to, communicate in Korean. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your explanation, which are very well taken. I'm sorry I cannot speak in Korean as a UN official. Maybe one more comment, and then Professor Lee, if you have a. So, gentlemen.
네, 안녕하세요. 제가 뭐 영어로 해야 되지만은 영어는 제가 잘 못해서 그냥 한국말로 하겠습니다. 지금 그 김 선생님께서 말씀하신 거, 그다음에 이 패널 전부에서 했던 얘기처럼 아마 글로벌 시티즌십 에듀케이션이 굉장히 중요하다고 생각합니다. 그러면서 이제 지금 말씀하신 것처럼 세 가지를 말씀하신 정직, 성실, 책임 말씀하셨는데 사실은 그거보다는 저는 조금 더 근본적으로 돌아갔으면 좋겠다는 말씀을 드리고 싶거든요. 그건 뭔가 하면은 우리가 가지고 있는 본성이 분명히 있는데 그게 세계적으로 공통될 거라고 생각합니다. 그러니까 이제 사람으로서 어떻게 보면 근본적인 본성에 해당되는 거죠. 그래서 그걸로 돌아가는 게 아마 글로벌 시티즌십 에듀케이션에서는 가장 근본적인 게 아니겠는가. 그게 그 다음에 이제 정직도 나올 거고 성실도 나올 거고 다 나올 거라고 생각합니다. 그래서 밸류 관련되는 한은 아마 그쪽에 조금 더 치중하는 게 어떨까. 그러니까 그 얘기는 결국 뭔가 우리가 본성으로 돌아간다는 거는 내가 가지고 있는 그러니까 선입관이라든가 그 뭐 고정관념이라든가 이런 것들을 벗어났을 때 그게 가능할 거라고 생각합니다. 그 얘기는 뭔가 우리가 가지고 있는 과거의 경험 중에서 잘못된 것들 또는 그 본성에서 벗어난 것들 그것을 벗어나면 벗어날수록 우리는 그러니까 세계 시민 교육의 가장 기본적인 걸 우리가 가르쳐 주는 게 되지 않겠나 하는 생각을 해봅니다. 고맙습니다. 기회를 주셔서 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much, Professor Lee, for your insightful comment. Gentlemen, yes, your last commentator.
Sorry. Okay, I have a question.
Tell us who you are.
My name is Joseph, and I'm a pianist. Okay. Because the forum is here to aware that we need to be optimists instead of pessimists. However, I believe there's a difference between optimistic, realistic optimists and imaginative optimists. And my question is, in order to make all these goals, they sound wonderful, that I mentioned from today's forum, but in order to make this happen, we need highly qualified teachers who teach those students. My question is, what are the methods that UNESCO have been using to reach those teachers? Because I know many teachers around me, and many of the teachers are not aware of this program or all these achievements you're trying to make. So could you answer that, please?
Thank you very much. I value your question. I will personally avail myself to respond to your question, but since our time is almost up, I would rather ask our two discussants to wrap up, and Park Arief, you'll be the last, if not Ms. Kim. So can I ask Professor Park if you have any points to share?
Yes, I'd like to respond to the question raised on, well, first of all, the gentleman who just raised the question, and also the lady who asked about elaborating on how subjects should be taught with regard to GCE and reflected within the curriculum, and also maybe a short comment on lifelong learning. Now, I've mentioned that global citizenship education, for it to become more concrete, should be reflected in every curricular subject. And by that, what I meant was for educators to enable students to navigate through the common curriculum with a perspective. And the perspective should not be the mastery of a subject in order to get good grades and go to college. So the perspective should be more about what would this learning be beneficial? How is it beneficial for the collective or the community or at a global scale? So to elaborate, I mean, you can incorporate the values of global citizenship education in almost every subject. The natural sciences, we can there's a great room for discussion about how our understanding of our natural world relates to the global environment, for instance. And of course, social studies and literature, we can bring literary forms from other cultures, and which will enable us to give perspective on where we stand within the world community, so on and so forth. So there's infinite possibilities with regard to how we incorporate the values of global citizenship education within the existing curricula, rather than trying to build a completely new curriculum, which is wasteful and probably not very effective. And for that to materialize, as the gentleman, the pianist gentleman who just raised the question mentioned, it has to begin with better teacher training. We have to equip teachers with the skills and the tools to be able to talk fluently in the global citizenship language. And that's up to the particular local education parties to manage how we are going to build teacher training around that theme. Finally, lifelong learning. I think community learning, which goes hand in hand with lifelong learning, will enhance our collective intelligence. And that will be based on empowerment. What can be more empowering than for us to understand how things are, what kind of things are going on around us beyond our immediate surroundings. I mean, that in itself is an empowering experience. And I think that if we relate that to lifelong learning with community learning, I think together with learning in school, we can push this GCED agenda in a more realistic path.
Thank you, Professor. You are now very optimistic. If Dr. Chung, if you have any comments, can you make it in a split second?
I agree with Professor Lee. I simply define the global citizenship education in this stage only to understand and respect the universal values, the respect human rights, cultural diversity, and balanced understanding on the other cultures. This is, if you have such a philosophy concept, and you are the global citizen in this stage. Very simple, and we already APSEU is not very well known in Korea, but we conducted those questions on teacher and teacher training. We had a lot of experience and knowledge, and the teaching and learning materials already developed, and we annual teacher training workshops by UNESCO APSEU. I hope you please click UNESCO APSEU website. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Arief. 1 minute.
Less than 1 minute. Thank you, our pianist. You know what? Teachers teachers are people who will go to heaven. You know. And I have a saying something. A moderate teacher is a person who tells, you know. A good teacher explains. But a great teacher inspires and empowers all potential. Not only mathematics, chemistry, or biology, but being an artist, pianist, you know. And who are they? Especially mother, your father and your teacher at school, and anybody who will become someone mentoring you to become a great teacher. Inshallah, we will be happy in this one. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Inshallah, indeed. The great teacher is someone who doesn't teach, doesn't talk, but lead by example. Ms. Kim, you have final say?
Very quickly. So I don't want to say I'm pessimistic, but I rather consider myself a realist. And and I still feel that we have a long way to go in trying to put into practice global citizenship education. And again, it varies from country to country. I know that there's in certain regions, like in Europe, I think it's a lot more advanced. But I know that Korea, I think, is still sort of a relatively new concept. And I know that there is actually a drive to somehow adapt or adopt this concept into the education system in Korea. But I'm sure, because coming a bit as an outsider, as an educator from outside the education sector, because that's not really my background, as you will see in the CV, perhaps in the program, and not. I would rather say that I think the education sector is one of the most conservative sectors that we deal with. And in that sense, it's not all going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen very easily. It will require a lot of work. It will require a lot of building the foundation and slowly building it up. It is going to be a massive work. I mean, you will have to not only deal with teacher training, the tools that comes with it, the materials, and training for what kind of teachers for what purpose and at what level, because we are talking everything from pre-primary to higher education or adult education as well in the perspective of lifelong learning, which is what UNESCO is actually pushing for. And I did mention that they are preparing an age-appropriate guidelines on how to do this that will be discussed also in Paris in January. And eventually that will hopefully be adapted at the national level and in the different contexts of the education systems. I just wanted to respond very quickly to the young lady who mentioned something about if Korea is a good model to promote in the next Global Education Forum. I have mixed feelings about it myself, although having not really gone through Korean education system from primary all the way to high school. I mostly did my education in Korea at the university level, so I've been kind of lucky to avoid it. But I do see how young people suffer in this country. I do have two young nieces living in Seoul who are struggling every day, trying to survive in the education system here. But outside of Korea, Korea does have a reputation of having done so well in education, and that it is really the foundational rock for the progress and development the country has made. But it is true, and I think it behooves upon all of us to make sure that the message that we get out there is very balanced, and this is something that we should be doing also in May next year. That yes, we have certainly made progress, but there's still work to be done. And I think that sort of messages also have to come from all of you who are sitting here in this room. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kim. I hate to end the session here because I realize there's so much enthusiasm and sincerity, but we have to end. Then I realize I have no time to conclude, but I would like to convey a couple of messages to my fellow Koreans. Having worked outside the country almost 6 years by now, two things. I think Koreans, me included, compete too much. No time to relax, no time to understand others. So this learning to live together is something that we should be very serious about, how to incorporate learning to live with GC. And for that, the Koreans, again, me included, need to understand others better. You know, many of us didn't know that Indonesia as a country has more than 17,000 islands, more than 50 million students. So I would suggest that for our fellow Koreans, let us not just compete, but also learn to collaborate, because these issues, as Ms. Kim said, this climate change, Ebola, they do not respect national boundaries. They transcend national boundaries. For that, we need to work together with others from other nations, other civilization, other culture, and average Korean, in my humble opinion, does not understand enough about our country. So starting from Indonesia, Park Arief will be very resourceful in terms of letting your country known to our fellow Koreans. Would you agree? And provide information. And Apseyu, I will tell you, Apseyu is very less known in the country, but they generate lots of interesting publication. If you want to learn about Asia, Pacific countries, please do visit or contact APSI. I think they have a lot of materials about countries and regions. So with that, I would once again thank you all for your participation. Ladies and gentlemen, let us again give big hands to our speakers and discussants. Thank you very much.
네, 수고해주신 김광조 유네스코 아시아 태평양 지역 본부장님과 서중한 강연해주신 발표자, 토론자분들께 다시 한번 깊은 감사의 말씀드립니다.